Welcome to Dead Quiet Mysteries, the place where every cold case, chilling crime, and unsolved mystery is brought back to life. From vanished persons to twisted betrayals, we dig deep into the unknown to uncover the truth that others left buried. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us which city and country you're watching from. We love seeing how far the mystery travels. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell icon so you never miss a case. Because here, some truths are only heard in the dead quiet. Hercule Poirot and the Lie That Tocked. Chapter 1. An Invitation to Eldercombe. It was a grey morning in early October when Hercule Poirot, immaculately groomed and enjoying his second cup of chocolate, received the letter that would take him into the heart of yet another curious affair. The envelope was thick, cream-coloured, and bore an unfamiliar crest, a coiled serpent around an hourglass, exquisitely embossed in violet wax. Poirot's eyebrows lifted delicately as he inspected the seal with practiced precision. He murmured. How melodramatic. He slit the envelope open with the edge of his letter opener, unfolded the heavy writing paper with its faint scent of lavender, and read, Monsieur Poirot, I hope you will forgive the boldness of this letter. I am Lady Isabel Vale, widow of the late Sir Everard Vale of Eldercombe Hall. My husband passed away suddenly 3 weeks ago. Though his death was ruled natural by our doctor, certain irregularities have left me restless in mind and heart. I cannot say more now, only that I feel the shadows of deceit gathering about me. If you would do me the kindness of visiting Eldercombe, I believe you may find matters that warrant your most particular attention, but I must beg your utmost discretion. My household is proud and easily rattled. With deepest respect, Lady Isabel Vale. Poirot read the letter twice, then, folding it carefully, he tapped it against the edge of his saucer. My friend Hastings, he said aloud to the empty room, would no doubt remark that the lady is dramatic and vague. And he would not be wrong, but... He tilted his head, eyes narrowing with interest. It is the vague letters, the cryptic suggestions which so often conceal the darkest truths. Within 2 days, Poirot found himself travelling through the sun-dappled countryside of Gloucestershire, his eyes alert to every shift in the landscape. As the train whistled into the sleepy station of Eldercombe, he stepped onto the platform with his usual fastidiousness, hat precisely tilted, moustaches gleaming, gloves immaculate. Waiting for him was a sleek black motor car and a young chauffeur with a stiff collar and a faint expression of distaste. "From Eldercombe Hall?" Poirot inquired politely. The young man nodded. "Yes, sir. Lady Vale's orders. She said to bring you without delay." Poirot inclined his head. "Très bien. Then let us not delay." The ride through the country lanes was pleasant enough, rolling fields lined with dry stone walls, copses of autumnal trees glowing russet and gold. Yet as they turned up the long gravel drive of Eldercombe Hall, the landscape seemed to shift. The light dimmed subtly beneath heavy boughs, and a hush fell over the grounds. Eldercombe Hall emerged from behind a line of yews, an ancient, ivy-clad manor of grey stone, and gabled roofs with tall, mullioned windows that glinted coldly in the waning light. Poirot stepped from the car and regarded the house thoughtfully. "It has character," he murmured, "and secrets, perhaps." A liveried butler opened the vast oak door and ushered Poirot into the entrance hall. The air inside was cool and faintly musty, carrying a hint of old wood, polish, and something more elusive, something metallic. Poirot's keen eyes took in his surroundings at once. The hall was large, high-ceilinged, and curiously dominated by clocks. Dozens of them. Grandfather clocks, mantel clocks, carriage clocks, even a cuckoo clock perched above the wide stairwell. Each ticked at its own pace, creating a strangely discordant symphony of time. He was still listening to this eerie rhythm when a voice addressed him from the staircase. "Monsieur Poirot." She descended slowly, a vision in dove grey silk and pearls, Her auburn hair swept elegantly away from a pale, composed face. Lady Isabel Vale moved with practiced grace, but her eyes, dark, shadow-ringed, and deeply watchful, betrayed an unrest beneath the poise. "I cannot tell you how grateful I am that you came." Poirot bowed slightly. "Madame, the gratitude is mine. Curiosity is a great motivator, and your letter intrigued me greatly." She smiled faintly. "I meant it too. Come, I will take you to the drawing room." The drawing room, though richly furnished, had an air of neglect. Poirot noticed dust on the corners of a table, and the fireplace had not been lit, despite the chill. Another clock ticked loudly on the mantel, 10 minutes fast. As Lady Isabel poured tea with steady hands, she began, almost cautiously. "My husband, Sir Everard, died in his sleep 3 weeks ago. He was found in his study chair. Heart failure, the doctor said. It was peaceful, or so they claim." Poirot observed her intently. "And you are not so certain?" She paused. Everard was a man of routines, obsessions. Chief among them, time. Every room must have a clock, each set precisely. Lately, he had become secretive, distracted. The night he died, one of the clocks, the Dutch one, in his study, disappeared. Disappeared? She nodded. Vanished. He prized it above all others, claimed it held the legacy of generations. He would never have sold it. "Interesting," murmured Poirot. "And who resides in the house with you?" "His daughter, Veronica, is here. She came from London for the funeral and has stayed on. Dr. Reeves, our family doctor, visits frequently. And there's Horace Tyndall, Everard's clockmaker, practically a recluse. We also have a guest, Mr. Basil Quayle, an antiquarian. He arrived for Everard's collection, but has lingered too long, in my opinion." Poirot nodded, already slotting names into the compartments of his mind. "And Inspector Caulfield? I presume he investigated?" "Briefly. The coroner agreed with Dr. Reeves, natural causes. There was no autopsy." Poirot's moustaches twitched. "Ah, mais oui, sometimes the neatest deaths conceal the most untidy truths." There was a knock at the door, and a tall young woman entered. She was striking, with sharply intelligent eyes and a cool air of detachment. "Ah," said Lady Isabel. "Veronica, this is Monsieur Hercule Poirot." Veronica Vale extended her hand politely. "So, Mother's called in the great detective. I do hope you'll find ghosts. We do so love theatrics in this house." Poirot inclined his head. "Mademoiselle, I find truth often dresses itself in theatrical costume." Veronica smirked faintly and withdrew, leaving behind an uneasy silence. Poirot turned back to Lady Isabel. "Madame, I will take the liberty of examining Sir Everard's study this afternoon. I wish to speak also with the others." She looked at him, her poise cracking slightly. "You believe me, then?" "That something is wrong?" Poirot rose. "Madame, I believe that when a woman writes a letter such as yours, there is always something wrong, whether it is murder or madness that I have yet to see, but I promise you I shall discover the truth." He bowed once more, then stepped lightly out of the room, the many clocks echoing behind him, each tick a heartbeat in the mystery that was only just beginning. Chapter 2. A House Full of Clocks. The following morning arrived draped in a pearly mist that clung stubbornly to the lawns of Eldercombe Hall. Dew glittered on the hedgerows, and the trees, now fully surrendered to autumn's touch, rustled faintly in the breeze. Hercule Poirot stood by the tall windows of his guest room, watching a gardener rake fallen leaves with methodical strokes. Behind him, a grandfather clock chimed the half-hour, its bell muted by distance. Poirot turned and inspected the room once more. It was charming, in a restrained, slightly austere way. Chintz curtains, mahogany furnishings, a dressing table that had once seen better days. But it was the clock, an elegant Regency piece with brass inlay that held his attention. It was 10 minutes slow. "Mon Dieu," he muttered, "in this house no two clocks agree." After breakfast, a quiet, strained affair in the morning room with Lady Isabel, Veronica, and Mr. Basil Quayle, Poirot requested permission to view Sir Everard's study. Lady Isabel led him through a narrow corridor lined with ancestral portraits and deep-set windows, her heels clicking softly on the parquet floor. The air here was cooler, tinged faintly with something chemical, polish perhaps, or machine oil. He kept the study locked when not in use, she explained, producing a long brass key from a chatelaine at her waist. Even I didn't have access unless invited. Very particular, Poirot said gently, noting the faint tremor in her hand as she unlocked the door. The study was cavernous, lined with floor-to-ceiling shelves crammed with leather-bound volumes. A massive desk dominated the center of the room, its surface neatly arranged, quills in an ivory holder, a crystal inkwell, and a blotter with a single piece of monogrammed paper, blank and untouched. But the most striking feature was, once again, the clocks. At least a dozen adorned the walls, mantels, and alcoves. Each was of a different make, from a French ormolu carriage clock to a squat, ticking German regulator. Most curiously, Poirot noted that a circular void in the dust on one shelf indicated a missing timepiece. "That's where the Dutch clock stood," Lady Isabel murmured. It had belonged to his great-grandfather. He claimed it held a secret mechanism, some family trick. "Do you recall when you last saw it?" "The evening before he died. He was polishing it himself, which was unusual. He wouldn't let Horace near it." Poirot's eyes twinkled. Ah, so even the trusted clockmaker was not to be trusted with this particular treasure? She managed a small, wry smile. "Horace Tyndall is very gifted, but rather intense. He gets lost in his work. Everard said he tampered too much." Poirot bent over the vacant spot, inspecting it minutely. A faint arc of oil residue glistened in the wood grain. Something had indeed been lifted, hurriedly by the look of it. "May I speak with this Mr. Tyndall? He lives in the old gardener's cottage. I can send for him." Poirot waved a hand. "No, no. I will call on him myself, but first I should like to see the library. I believe Miss Veronica had her incident there." Lady Isabel nodded stiffly. "Yes, the evening of Everard's birthday. We were having a quiet supper," she excused herself, "and was found 15 minutes later, unconscious." Poirot followed her to the library. It was a vast room with deep armchairs and faded rugs, dominated by rows of ancient tomes and heavy drapery. Here again, clocks adorned the corners. A faint, bitter scent still lingered in the air, something chemical and unpleasantly familiar. Poirot moved slowly through the room, taking in the shattered remains of a small glass timepiece on a side table. Was this the one she broke? Yes, she fell against it. Or perhaps, Poirot murmured, someone arranged her fall. He paused by a drinks cabinet, sniffed at a decanter, and tapped a cup with his nail. It gave a dull ring. Empty, but unwashed. Poirot's brow furrowed. "Lady Vale, who discovered her?" "Dr. Reeves. He was due for supper and found her lying there. We thought it might be an overdose, but the doctor said there were no signs of such a thing. He called it a sudden collapse brought on by nerves." Poirot's moustaches bristled. "And yet, you called for me." She looked away. "Because I don't believe in nervous collapses. Veronica is sharp and level-headed. She doesn't faint." "Indeed," Poirot turned to the door. "And now, if you will excuse me, I wish to visit Monsieur Tyndall." The clockmaker's cottage. The cottage sat at the edge of the estate, half hidden by overgrown hedges and a twisted oak tree that leaned toward the roof as though eavesdropping. Poirot knocked firmly. After a few moments, the door creaked open. Horace Tyndall was a wiry, middle-aged man with narrow shoulders and hands stained by years of oils and varnish. He blinked at Poirot as though waking from a trance. "Mr. Tyndall, I am Hercule Poirot. May I trouble you for a few moments?" The man inclined his head slowly, then stepped aside. The interior of the cottage was a cramped chaos of ticking clocks in various states of disassembly. Parts, springs, and faces lay on every surface. The atmosphere was one of focused obsession. "I hear you maintain Sir Everard's clocks," Poirot began gently. Tyndall nodded, his fingers twitching. He was particular, liked symmetry, liked knowing when time was passing. "And the Dutch clock, can you tell me anything about it?" The man's face darkened. "He stopped me touching it, said it was sacred. He used to talk to it. Thought there was a message inside." Poirot's eyebrows lifted. "A message?" "In the chimes. He said they struck differently at sunset, some kind of warning. Was it ever serviced?" "Not by me, he kept it locked." Poirot paused. "Would you say he feared something?" Tyndall's eyes flitted to the window. "Feared time," he whispered. "Feared the hour when things end." Poirot thanked him and left, his mind already abuzz. The phrase stuck with him, the hour when things end. It reminded him, oddly, of Lady Isabel's letter, shadows of deceit gathering, an unexpected conversation. As Poirot returned to the hall, he encountered Veronica Vale near the rose garden. She was pacing, smoking a cigarette, her expression distant. "You're wasting your time, Monsieur Poirot," she said flatly. "Ah, but mademoiselle, time is never wasted when it reveals the truth." She exhaled sharply. "I don't believe in conspiracies. My father died of old age and stubbornness." Poirot inclined his head. "And yet someone wished you ill the other night?" Veronica's eyes narrowed. "If someone did, it wouldn't be for my father's sake. It would be because I'm standing in the way." "Of what?" "Inheritance? Influence? I am my father's daughter. Not everyone likes that." Poirot studied her carefully. "You are observant and proud." "And you're clever," she said coolly. "But clever men don't always win." Poirot's smile was unreadable. "Ah, but mademoiselle, it is not a competition. It is merely a question of facts, and I am most fond of facts." She flicked her cigarette into the grass and walked away without another word. Poirot watched her go, his mind turning. That evening, Poirot returned to his room, and while preparing for bed, adjusted the clock on his nightstand. It was, like the others, incorrect. This one, 5 minutes, slow. He set it precisely to the correct time, wound it gently, and sat beside it, listening. Tick, tick, tick. His gaze drifted out the window, where the night had thickened into a velvet hush. Somewhere in the house, a distant clock struck 8, but the one on his table stayed silent. Poirot leaned in, eyes gleaming. The hands had stopped. He murmured. "One by one the voices of time fall quiet. But I shall listen to the silence." Chapter 3. A Death at Dusk. Dusk settled over Eldercombe Hall like a velvet shroud. The late October air had turned sharply cold, and a soft wind rustled the golden leaves in hissing murmurs along the gravel paths. In the drawing-room, a fire crackled feebly behind the brass screen, casting flickers of amber across the brocade armchairs and polished floor. Hercule Poirot stood at the window, his arms folded neatly behind his back, watching the sky turn from rose to violet. Eldercombe, for all its grandeur, had begun to weigh heavily upon him. There was something, some vibration of unease, that hummed through its ancient walls. It was not merely grief, nor the eccentricity of a house full of clocks, but a tangible tension, as if time itself were pressing inward. The evening had thus far been uneventful. Lady Isabel had retired early with a headache. Veronica had gone riding before supper, and returned just before the hour. Mr. Basil Quayle, the antiquarian guest, had taken a solitary walk in the orchard. Poirot had taken mental note of each movement, each face, each seemingly trivial interaction. In murder, the ordinary was often the most deceptive. He was just about to ring for a cup of cocoa when a sharp knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was the butler, Hargreaves, his face unusually pale. "Begging your pardon, sir," he said, voice low and unsteady. "There's been an incident." Poirot turned at once. "Go on." "It's Dr. Reeves, sir. He's been found, on the lawn, near the sundial." "Found?" Poirot's tone sharpened. "Alive or dead?" The butler hesitated. "Dead, sir." Poirot moved without a word. Outside, the air hit him like cold glass. The path was already muddy underfoot, and the last light of day was swiftly disappearing. A pair of housemaids hovered near the hedgerow, shivering and whispering, while Basil Quayle stood with a stiff back beside a long stone bench, arms crossed tightly. Poirot followed the faint murmur of voices to the sundial at the edge of the formal garden. There, beneath the bronze face of time immortalized in iron, lay the body of Dr. Lionel Reeves. He was slumped awkwardly across the grass, one arm outstretched as if trying to grasp something, the other curled beneath him. His glasses were askew, and his eyes, those clever, calculating eyes, were fixed in a vacant stare toward the treetops. His coat was damp, and a faint sheen of foam clung to his lips. Poirot knelt down. Carefully, he checked the pulse. There was none. The grass beneath the doctor was slightly flattened, as though he had collapsed rather than struggled. A few feet away, a broken pair of tweezers lay gleaming in the grass, an odd thing to find in such a place. Poirot gently picked them up with a handkerchief. He turned to Hargreaves. "Who found him?" "Miss Vale, sir." Veronica stepped into the circle of torchlight, composed but breathless. "I was returning from the stables," she said crisply. "I saw something near the sundial. At first I thought it was one of the hounds. Then I saw it was Dr. Reeves. I called out, but he didn't move." "Did you touch him?" Number I wasn't sure. If it was safe. Poirot nodded approvingly. "Very wise." A rustle behind them announced the arrival of Lady Isabel, wrapped in a shawl, her eyes wide with alarm. "Lionel? Dead? But how?" "That," said Poirot softly, "is what I intend to discover. A question of poison." Back inside, the atmosphere was electric. The household gathered in the drawing room, Lady Isabel, pale and tight-lipped, Veronica, pacing restlessly, Basil Quayle, sipping brandy with shaking fingers, and Horace Tyndall, summoned from his cottage, hunched like a wary owl in a corner chair. Inspector Caulfield had been telephoned from Cheltenham, and would not arrive until morning. Until then, Poirot assumed authority, discreetly but unmistakably. "There is something curious about Dr. Reeves's death," Poirot began. There were no wounds, no signs of a struggle, and yet his face bore an expression of surprise. "Could it not have been natural?" Lady Isabel asked. Poirot shook his head. "No. The foam at the mouth, the stiff posture. I suspect poisoning, something swift and bitter." Quayle spoke for the first time. "You think he was murdered?" "I think," said Poirot carefully, "that he knew something, and someone feared what he might say." Veronica exhaled sharply. "This is madness. Who would poison a country doctor?" Poirot turned to her. "Perhaps someone who knew he had found a clue. Remember, mademoiselle, he was the first to find you unconscious in the library. He examined your father's body. He might have noticed something he kept quiet." Tyndall shifted in his seat. "Reeves wasn't quiet. He was nosy. He always came poking around the clocks, said they were unhealthy, claimed they told secrets." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "He said that?" Tyndall nodded slowly. "Twice, at least." "Curious," Poirot murmured. "For a man of medicine to be so interested in timepieces?" Quayle cleared his throat. "Forgive me, but if Dr. Reeves was murdered, then surely it's connected to Everard's death." "Ah," Poirot said softly. "You begin to see what I see, monsieur. A pattern, a design most deliberate." He stood and began to pace. "First, Sir Everard, dead of natural causes, with his most prized clock mysteriously missing. Then Miss Vale's collapse, unconvincing in its suddenness. And now Dr. Reeves, whose professional eye may have spotted inconsistencies, conveniently silenced." He turned to face them. "I ask you all, what connects these events?" Silence. Then Lady Isabel spoke, her voice thin. Time. Poirot smiled faintly. Precisely. The clock strikes. Twice later that night, Poirot remained in the study long after the household had retired. The clocks ticked around him in their fragmented rhythm, each out of step with the others. He moved from one to the next, adjusting their hands, examining their faces, listening intently. At midnight, a sound made him pause, a faint click behind a panel. Poirot turned sharply. Near the empty shelf where the Dutch clock had once stood, a panel had nudged open by an inch. He stepped forward, heart beating faster, and pushed it gently. It revealed a shallow compartment, empty but lined with worn velvet. Poirot's eyes glittered. "Ah," he whispered, so there was a secret after all. He turned and sat at the desk, opening Everard's journal. He had skimmed it earlier, pages of meticulous handwriting, largely about the estate, repairs, and clock maintenance. But tonight, he noticed a page dog-eared and rubbed thin. At the top, underlined in red ink, were the words, "The Violet Hour." Beneath, in hurried script, "They will come for it. I must hide the key before the hour turns. Veronica suspects nothing. Reeves is too inquisitive, must ensure he does not interfere. If the Dutch clock fails to protect it, then let it fall to the flame." Poirot stared at the page. "What were you hiding, mon ami?" he whispered. "And what, precisely, is the Violet Hour?" He rose slowly, extinguished the lamp, and left the study in shadow. Somewhere far off in the house, a clock struck 13. Chapter 4. The Violet Hour. Morning broke over Eldercombe Hall with a veil of pale gold, filtering through fog that curled like silk around the turrets and gables. The clocks of the house struck the hour in a disjointed chorus, some lagging behind, others chiming ahead. Hercule Poirot, already dressed in a crisp grey suit with a silk cravat, adjusted the cuffs of his shirt and observed the mist from his window with a furrowed brow. The events of the previous night lingered in his mind like the aftertaste of a bitter tonic. Dr. Reeves dead, so suddenly, so precisely. A hidden panel in the study. A journal entry scrawled in haste, hinting at secrets and betrayals. And always, the whisper of the Violet Hour. Poirot descended the staircase slowly, his hand brushing the polished banister. The house felt different now. The air was taut, expectant, as if Eldercombe itself knew it was sheltering something dark beneath its genteel facade. In the morning room, he found Lady Isabel seated stiffly at the table, her teacup untouched. She looked up as he entered, her face drawn and pale. "You slept poorly, madame?" Poirot inquired, easing into the chair opposite her. "I didn't sleep at all," she said quietly. "First Everard, now Dr. Reeves. It feels like something is unraveling." "Indeed," Poirot said, "and it is my task to follow the thread wherever it leads." Veronica entered next, dressed in a riding habit, her hair tied back with effortless precision. She greeted Poirot with a curt nod, poured herself black coffee, and sipped it without sitting. "There'll be a scandal," she remarked, her tone sharp. "2 deaths in 1 week. The villagers are already whispering." "Let them whisper," Lady Isabel said, her voice thin. "We've nothing to hide." Veronica gave her mother a long, unreadable glance. "I wonder." Poirot cleared his throat gently. "Before Dr. Reeves died, he was disturbed. Did either of you notice anything unusual in his behavior?" Lady Isabel shook her head. Veronica frowned slightly. "He did seem tense," she admitted. "More than usual. When I asked him about Father's death, he dismissed me, almost snapped at me. That wasn't like him." Poirot leaned forward. "And what did he say?" "Only that it was natural causes, but his eyes told another story. He was lying or hiding something." "Merci, mademoiselle," Poirot said. "You are more perceptive than you admit." Just then, Basil Quayle appeared in the doorway, smoothing his jacket and blinking behind his spectacles. "I beg your pardon, Lady Vale. Monsieur Poirot, might I borrow a moment of your time after breakfast?" "Certainly, monsieur," Poirot replied. "We shall speak in the study." a confession of curiosities. Later, seated across from Quayle in the late Sir Everard's study, Poirot waited as the antiquarian fidgeted with his cufflinks. He looked less assured this morning, his skin waxy, his hands unsteady. "I wasn't entirely honest with you," he said finally, "about why I came to Eldercombe." Poirot tilted his head. "Ah, then do enlighten me." "I came because Everard wrote to me 2 weeks before his death. He was troubled. Said he'd made a discovery involving an old artifact passed down in the family, a sort of mechanical puzzle hidden within a Dutch clock. He wanted my opinion, privately." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "He believed it had value?" "Not monetary," Quayle replied. "Symbolic. He mentioned a legacy that must not fall into the wrong hands. And something he called the violet hour. I assumed it was a poetic flourish." Poirot's mind raced. "Did you ever examine this object?" "Number. By the time I arrived, he had hidden it. When I asked about the clock, he was vague, distracted." Poirot rose and walked to the empty shelf again. "And now it is missing. Stolen, perhaps, by someone who feared what your opinion might reveal." Quayle nodded somberly. "You think the clock holds the motive?" Poirot touched the velvet lining of the shelf. "I think it may hold the key." The clockmaker's return. Poirot visited Horace Tyndall's cottage again just before noon. The clockmaker was hunched over a disassembled carriage clock, but looked up warily as Poirot entered. "You're persistent," Tyndall muttered. "I am Belgian, monsieur," Poirot replied with a faint smile. "Persistence is in my blood." He glanced around. The walls were lined with tools, clock faces, and dozens of tiny labelled drawers. In a dusty corner, Poirot noticed a curious case, empty, but shaped like the missing Dutch clock. He approached it slowly. "May I?" he asked. Tyndall grunted. "It was brought here months ago for polishing. He never collected it." "But it is empty." The clockmaker paused. "He came back for it last week. Said he'd changed his mind. Took it without a word." Poirot ran his hand along the edge of the case. "And what of the mechanism? Did you ever look inside?" Tyndall hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Once, just once. It wasn't like anything I've seen. A second movement, hidden behind the main gears, marked with symbols, not numbers." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Symbols?" "Ancient ones. Letters. Greek, maybe. There was a switch hidden in the casing. When I turned it, the clock struck 13 chimes." Poirot straightened slowly. 13? Tyndall nodded. "He caught me. Was furious. Said I'd tampered with his inheritance." Poirot pressed a finger to his lips, thoughtful. "And when did he last mention the violet hour?" Tyndall glanced toward the window. "The night before he died. He said, 'If I don't survive it, tell them the chime was meant to warn them.'" Poirot froze. "Warn them of what?" But the clockmaker only shook his head. He didn't say. The violet mark. Returning to the hall, Poirot took a detour through the solarium, where Veronica stood trimming roses with gloved hands. She seemed lost in thought, but glanced up at his approach. "I found something last night," she said without preamble. "In my father's coat." Poirot halted. "Yes, mademoiselle?" She drew a folded sheet of paper from her pocket and handed it to him. It was old, yellowed, and faintly scented of tobacco. The writing was Sir Everard's. "At the violet hour the past returns. I have locked the truth inside the chimes. Only the one who listens will understand." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "May I keep this?" Veronica nodded. "Of course." He turned to go, but paused. "You were close to your father, were you not?" A muscle twitched in her jaw. "He raised me as an equal. He respected my mind. That's rare in men of his age." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "And do you believe he feared someone here?" "I think he feared his legacy might be twisted by those who did not deserve it." She turned back to the roses, snipping cleanly through a thorned stem. "The hour approaches." That evening, Poirot sat in the library, surrounded by silence. Outside, the mist returned, pressing against the windows like a living thing. The clocks in the room ticked in uneven tempo. He retrieved the journal once more and flipped to the page about the violet hour. At the bottom, in the same scrawled hand, he noticed something new, a sketch. It was a small circular dial with 4 Greek letters etched in the cardinal points. Beneath it, a phrase in Latin. Tempus revelat, time reveals. At that moment, a sudden shrill chime echoed through the house. Poirot stood abruptly. It was not midnight, and yet the note had rung, clear, sharp, and unmistakable. He checked his watch. 8:47. One of the clocks was chiming out of sequence. Poirot moved swiftly through the corridors, guided by instinct. He found himself once more at the study. The door was ajar. Inside, a strange scent lingered, smoke and something floral. On the desk sat a violet envelope, unsealed. He stepped forward and opened it. Inside was a single line. She knows, but she won't speak. Poirot closed his eyes briefly. The violet hour had struck, and now at last he saw the shape of the trap. Chapter 5. Secrets in Chimes. The house had grown deathly still, as though it too sensed that time had shifted. Hercule Poirot stood alone in the study, the violet envelope gripped gently between his gloved fingers. The clock on the mantel had just finished its discordant chime. 8:47, and yet it had struck 13. Again. He glanced around the dim room. The fire had gone out, and the heavy curtains swayed slightly, though no window was open. Somewhere within these walls a mechanism stirred, hidden, ancient, and waiting. He tucked the envelope inside his jacket and moved swiftly to the desk, retrieving Sir Everard's journal once more. The Latin inscription at the bottom of the sketched dial, Tempus revelat, echoed in his mind. Time reveals. He traced the 4 Greek letters drawn on the page, alpha, theta, sigma, and pi, forming the cardinal points of a mysterious dial. Not arbitrary letters, he realized, but symbolic. Codes. The mind of a man who dealt in timepieces would surely craft a message only someone with an understanding of clockwork and intellect could decipher. It was time to call the suspects together again, but this time he would not simply ask questions, he would test them. The gathering. The drawing room was already lit when Poirot summoned the remaining residents of Eldercombe Hall. Lady Isabel arrived first, her expression pinched and weary. Veronica followed silently, her eyes sharp and unreadable. Basil Quayle entered last, looking as though he'd not slept in days, his jacket buttoned incorrectly. Poirot stood by the fire, arms folded behind his back, his stance composed. "Mesdames, monsieur," he began gently, "I have brought you here not to accuse, but to understand." Lady Isabel blinked. "Understand what exactly?" Poirot's tone softened. "Your husband was not merely a collector of clocks, he was the guardian of something he believed to be vital, dangerous even. He called it the violet hour, a secret he feared might be misused." Quayle gave a snort. "I still don't understand what this violet hour is supposed to be. A code? A place? A metaphor?" Poirot smiled faintly. "It is all of those things, monsieur, and more, but before I explain, allow me to ask, where were each of you at precisely 8:47 this evening?" Lady Isabel frowned. "In my room, writing correspondence." "I was in the solarium," said Veronica without hesitation. "The fire was low and I went to relight it." Basil hesitated. "The library, reading. I didn't hear a clock strike." Poirot nodded. "Curious, no?" The chime was unmistakable, 13 notes, a clock out of step. Veronica crossed her arms. "And you think someone triggered it? On purpose?" "No," said Poirot. "I think the house is speaking, revealing itself." He moved to the fireplace and pressed gently against the left column. There was a faint click, and once again the concealed panel near the bookcase slid open. Gasps followed. "But," Lady Isabel stammered, "I've lived here over 20 years. I never saw that." Poirot smiled. Because you never listened when the house spoke. Sir Everard constructed this chamber to conceal the clock, not just from thieves, but from family. The Dutch clock, as I suspected, did not merely tell time, it hid truth. He stepped into the narrow cavity. At its center stood a pedestal, and upon it a small velvet-lined box. It was empty. Poirot turned. You see, whatever the clock once protected is now gone. Veronica's voice was low. Then someone here took it. Just so, said Poirot. And yet, no one will admit it. The puzzle box. Later that evening, Poirot returned to his room, only to find something unexpected placed upon his pillow. It was a small wooden cube, smooth and blackened with age. No note accompanied it. He examined it carefully, noting the faint grooves along its sides. A puzzle box. Enfin, he whispered. It took him 15 minutes to slide apart the pieces, twisting and turning each layer until the inner chamber loosened. Inside, a tightly folded parchment waited, yellowed and brittle. Unfolding it, Poirot found a cipher of letters arranged in a spiral, surrounded by intricate mechanical diagrams. In the center, the words, "When 13 sounds, the path will open. Only blood born of the house may claim it." Poirot's eyes narrowed. Blood born of the house. Veronica? Possibly Lady Isabel, not Quayle, not Reeves. But if Reeves had found it and learned the cipher, his murder made sense. Poirot pocketed the parchment, then went to check the mantel clock in his room. It was still ticking, but its minute hand had stopped moving. A second fall. The night deepened. Mist once more crawled across the estate. Poirot had just settled into his armchair, intent on reviewing Sir Everard's coded pages, when a sudden thump echoed from the hallway below. A cry followed, distant but unmistakably male. Poirot sprang to his feet. Down the staircase he found Hargreaves, the butler, standing stock still at the base of the library steps, mouth agape. "Sir, it's Mr. Quayle, he's fallen!" Poirot rushed past him, heart thudding. At the bottom of the rear stair, Basil Quayle lay crumpled, his body twisted unnaturally, his glasses lay cracked beside his outstretched hand. Poirot bent swiftly, a faint pulse, weak but present. "Call for the doctor," he said urgently. "Quayle must live." As servants rushed to obey, Poirot noticed something glinting beneath the stair. A brass clock key, old and ornate. He picked it up, expression unreadable. The time was nearly midnight. The violet truth emerges. Later, with Quayle safely unconscious but stable, Poirot summoned Veronica privately to the study. She arrived in her dressing gown, her expression one of tight control. "You said once," Poirot began, "that your father respected your mind, trusted you." Veronica's eyes narrowed. "Yes." "Then I must ask plainly, did he show you the Dutch clock's mechanism?" She did not answer immediately. Then, "He showed me the inside. Said it was a family secret. That it would one day fall to me to protect it. But I never understood what it meant." Poirot held up the parchment from the puzzle box. "Did you place this in my room?" Her eyes widened. "No." He believed her. "Then someone is playing both sides," he murmured. "Someone who wants the truth hidden, yet fears I'm too close." Veronica stepped forward. "Poirot, what is this all really about?" Poirot met her gaze. "A document, perhaps, a confession, a letter, something buried in the chime, a device that, when triggered, reveals a secret chamber. Your father created it to protect what he believed must never fall into the wrong hands." Veronica nodded slowly. "And someone here believes otherwise." Poirot smiled grimly. "Just so. And when the violet hour chimes again, I shall be waiting." Chapter 6. The hourglass turns. The morning light struggled to penetrate the overcast sky as thick mist still clung to the grounds of Eldercombe Hall. It was the kind of day where time seemed to hold its breath. The gravel paths were slick with dew, the air hushed, save for the occasional caw of a crow in the distance. Inside the grand house, silence reigned. Hercule Poirot was already awake, seated at a small writing desk in his room. His moustaches were perfectly waxed, his attire impeccable, a dove-grey suit, white linen gloves, and a deep purple tie that caught the lamplight. Before him lay the cryptic cipher, the brass clock key, and the faded parchment retrieved from the puzzle box. He reviewed his notes with the precision of a watchmaker, each observation examined for weight and meaning. It was no longer just about the deaths of Sir Everard and Dr. Reeves. It was about something older, something buried within the very heart of the house. And someone, Poirot was convinced, would kill again to protect it. There was a knock at the door. It was Hargreaves, composed as ever. "Miss Vale requests your presence in the gallery, sir?" Poirot nodded. "Merci. I shall attend her directly." Ancestral shadows. The long gallery stretched the length of the eastern wing. Dust motes danced in the morning gloom, disturbed only by the occasional footstep or creak of aged floorboards. Portraits of Vale ancestors lined the walls, their painted gazes sombre and watchful. Veronica Vale stood at the far end, beneath the looming frame of a severe-looking gentleman in naval uniform. Poirot approached quietly. "My grandfather," she said without turning. "Vice Admiral Heston Vale. He died at sea. They say his body was never recovered, only his timepiece." Poirot followed her gaze. The Admiral's hand rested on the hilt of a ceremonial sword. At his side hung a heavy silver pocket watch, depicted in careful detail by the artist. "I have seen that watch," Poirot said softly. Veronica turned, surprised. "You have?" "Oui, in a drawer in Sir Everard's study tucked beneath a sheaf of property records. I found it curious. Why hide something so obviously sentimental?" "He never mentioned it," she said slowly. "But I always felt there was something my father was afraid of in our past, a weight he couldn't put down." Poirot walked to the portrait and studied it. "And now, that weight has passed to you, mademoiselle. Are you ready to carry it?" Veronica said nothing, but her jaw tightened. Poirot smiled faintly. "Good. Then come, we have work to do." The mechanism revealed. Back in the study, Poirot set the Admiral's watch beside the brass key and cipher. "Observe," he said, motioning to Veronica, and moments later to Lady Isabel, who had been summoned with tea and some hesitation. The two women sat quietly as Poirot placed the clock key into the rear slot of the mantel clock, the same one that had struck 13 the night before. Sir Everard modified this timepiece. Within its gears lies a mechanism he designed, most likely in secret over many years. Poirot adjusted the setting to 8:47, matching the mysterious moment when the chime had struck out of time. With a deliberate twist, he wound the key. A low click sounded, then a whirring. From behind the mantel, the wooden panels slid open. Again. But this time, something else happened. A portion of the floorboard beneath the rug trembled, then lifted slightly, as if a hidden latch had released it. Lady Isabel gasped. "Good heavens!" Poirot moved with care, peeling back the rug. Beneath it, set into the wooden floor, was a recessed compartment, lined with velvet, and locked with a brass seal engraved with the Vale family crest. He looked to Veronica. "You, mademoiselle, must open it." Hands trembling slightly, she knelt and pressed her father's signet ring, which she had worn on a chain since his death, against the crest. A soft click. The lid opened to reveal a thin, flat case bound in faded leather. Inside it lay a folded document, brittle but intact. Lady Isabel leaned forward. "What is it?" Poirot opened the case carefully. "A confession," he said, "and perhaps a curse." The Admiral's secret, Veronica read aloud, her voice steady despite the intensity of the moment. "To whomever bears the Vale name, know this. The timepiece I inherited was not merely a relic, but a map. A map to the truth of what I did in the war. The pocket watch holds a cipher that reveals the location of funds I was paid to conceal treason. bribes from a foreign agent. I was young, foolish. My conscience tormented me until I buried the truth here in Eldercombe, hidden behind chimes and riddles. Let no one profit from this betrayal. Let it die with my name." Veronica's hands fell to her lap. Lady Isabel looked stricken. "So this is what Everard feared," she said, "that the name would be shamed." Poirot was grave. "No, madam. He feared someone would discover this secret and use it for personal gain." And he was right. A shift in the air. That afternoon, Poirot walked the misted gardens with Hargreaves under the guise of needing fresh air. In truth, he was watching the house. "Tell me," he said quietly, "who had access to the mantel clock?" Hargreaves didn't hesitate. "All of us, though Mr. Quayle seemed especially interested in it. I once saw him examine the back plate with a magnifier when he thought no one was watching." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Indeed?" The butler nodded. "And the doctor, Dr. Reeves, he once asked if the clock had ever chimed at the wrong hour. I thought it a strange question at the time." Poirot folded his hands behind his back. "Strange indeed." He paused beside the sundial. "And you, Hargreaves, have you served this house long?" 34 years, sir." Poirot turned to him. "Then I shall trust your memory. Did Sir Everard ever speak of the violet hour to you?" Hargreaves hesitated. "Only once. He said if anything ever happened to him I should burn the Admiral's watch." Poirot's eyes widened. "And you did not?" "I couldn't, sir. It felt wrong." Poirot nodded slowly. "Then we may thank your conscience. It may be the only one in this house still unburdened." Closing circles. That evening, Veronica approached Poirot in the library carrying a faded photograph. It depicted a younger Everard, Reeves and Quayle standing beside the Dutch clock, each of them looking solemn. "My father trusted both of them," she said, "but I think only one ever earned it." Poirot studied the photo. "It is a strange thing, mademoiselle, how often those who smile with us in the light conspire against us in the dark." She sat beside him, setting the photo down. "I need to know," she whispered. "Do you think Dr. Reeves was murdered for this secret?" Poirot looked at her gravely. "I do, and I believe Basil Quayle discovered it too late and paid the price for his curiosity. The question now is, who benefits from these deaths?" She stared into the fire. "And who fears what the chimes will reveal?" Poirot rose. "The hourglass has nearly emptied, Mademoiselle Vale. One final chime, and all will be known." Chapter 7. The Final Chime. The sky had turned a bruised lavender by late afternoon, streaked with coils of fog rolling in from the moors. Eldercombe Hall stood like a brooding sentinel, its tall windows catching the dying light in fractured gleams. Inside, the atmosphere had grown taut, thick with unspoken thoughts and glances that lingered too long. Hercule Poirot moved deliberately through the corridor, the faint scent of wax polish clinging to the walls, the hush of carpets muffling his steps. He passed the drawing room without pausing, ignoring the low murmur of Veronica and Lady Isabel in conversation. He was headed not to his room, but to the library, which had remained untouched since Basil Quayle's fall. There, the heavy bookshelves loomed like judges, silent and watchful. He closed the door gently behind him and approached the tall cabinet near the fireplace, where he had earlier found the Admiral's watch tucked out of sight. This time, he was searching for something else. He removed a few volumes from the shelf, naval memoirs, auction catalogues, and a tattered account of European espionage during the Great War. He examined the spines until his gloved fingers paused on a small, unlabeled book wedged too tightly between two larger tomes. With effort, he extracted it. A hollow weight. Inside, a black velvet pouch. Poirot opened it slowly. Inside was a lump of soft wax, molded faintly with a crescent-shaped impression, and a thin gold wire, no longer than a finger. He smiled grimly. "Ah," he murmured, the final piece of the puzzle. An unexpected confession. Poirot returned to the drawing room, where Veronica was seated alone now, her eyes fixed on the fire. She looked up as he entered. "You've found something," she said at once. "Oui, mademoiselle, the truth has nearly come into view." "Then tell me," she said, rising, "because I'm tired of waiting in the dark." Poirot motioned for her to sit once more. "Very well. Consider this, if you please. Reeves died not by accident, but by design. Quayle was pushed. I am certain of that now. Both men came dangerously close to unlocking the Violet Hour's secrets. One succeeded, the other tried and failed. Veronica leaned forward. But why kill Reeves? What did he know? Poirot steepled his fingers. He was an opportunist, a clever man who spent decades orbiting your father, earning his trust. But when he learned of the Admiral's confession, perhaps by discovering the cipher or the compartment beneath the clock, he saw a chance to extract value, perhaps even to sell the secret. Someone feared that. Someone silenced him. Veronica frowned. "You mean Lady Isabel?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, though his tone held a shadow of doubt. "She had motive, her family's name, reputation, fortune, and opportunity. But no, her movements that evening were too well accounted for." He paused. "There is someone else, mademoiselle. Someone cleverer than they seem." Just then the door opened. Lady Isabel entered, her expression unreadable. "Am I interrupting?" she asked coolly. "Not at all, madame," Poirot said, rising. "In fact, you have arrived at a most opportune moment." She sat without invitation. "Well, Monsieur Poirot, if you know who did it, I suggest you speak plainly. I am weary of riddles." Poirot looked at both women. "Then tomorrow morning, at exactly 8:47, I shall reveal the truth. For now, I ask only one thing. No one is to leave the house tonight." Lady Isabel raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting the killer is still here?" Poirot gave a soft nod. "Most assuredly, and they are far more dangerous than you realize." Nightfall and fractures. That evening, Eldercombe Hall was cloaked in an eerie silence. The wind had risen, moaning faintly in the chimney stacks. Rain tapped a slow rhythm against the glass. In the great hall, the clocks ticked in tandem, 100 mechanical hearts beating as one. Poirot paced the length of the study, then paused before the fire. Hargreaves entered quietly, bearing a silver tray with a cup of chocolate. "You've been most observant, Hargreaves," Poirot said. "Tell me, have you noticed anything missing from the house in recent days?" The butler nodded. "A ring, sir, from Sir Everard's bureau drawer. It was old, ornate, not worn often. It disappeared the day after he died." "Ah," Poirot said softly, "just as I suspected." The ring was likely a seal, used to imprint wax, perhaps even the wax he had just discovered in the hidden book. It had been used recently, of that he was certain. Poirot glanced at the small clock on the mantel. 11:10. "Soon," he murmured. "The truth comes with the final chime." The letter in the fire. Just before midnight, as the household quieted, a figure crept silently down the servants' corridor, unseen by all, except Poirot. He emerged from the shadowed doorway near the pantry and followed, his footsteps soundless. He watched as the figure entered the study, the door left ajar. There, the person knelt before the fire, drawing a folded document from within their coat. Poirot stepped forward. "I would not do that if I were you," he said calmly. The figure froze. Lady Isabel turned slowly, her face pale, the flames flickering across her cheekbones. "You followed me," she said hoarsely. "Indeed," Poirot replied. "I have been expecting you. You see, madame, it is always the one who plays the part of the dutiful widow so very well that draws my eye. You grieve with perfect posture, but you lie with greater precision." She stared at him. "It was for the family." "No," Poirot said sharply. "It was for yourself. Reeves threatened to expose the confession. Quayle became suspicious after your failed attempt to tamper with the mantle mechanism, so you removed them both. He moved closer. But there is one mistake you made, one small, telling detail. You used your late husband's seal to mark the wax in the cipher box, a symbol only he could legally use. But the wax was fresh, and he has been dead a fortnight. Lady Isabel sank into the armchair, her composure crumbling. "I couldn't let them ruin us," she said in a whisper. Everard was a fool. He wanted to expose everything, even the Admiral. Our legacy would have been obliterated. Poirot nodded gravely. "And so you buried the truth beneath the chime, but truth, madame, like time, always finds a way to the surface." The final preparation. As dawn neared, Poirot returned to his room, preparing for the last act. The case was all but solved, yet one element remained, a shadow he had not yet illuminated. He pulled from his notebook a final name, one he had written weeks earlier before ever setting foot in Eldercombe. A name unspoken in the house. Jonathan Vale, the brother, the exile, disinherited and long believed dead. And yet, Poirot now suspected the chime's final secret was not about Everard's confession alone, but about something that had remained hidden far longer. As he looked out at the estate, veiled in a bluish mist, he whispered, "Tomorrow I shall gather them all. And then, mes amis, the hour will strike, and the truth, at last, shall chime." Chapter 8. The Violet Hour Deception. The clock in the main hall struck 8:45. Each chime echoed through Eldercombe like a summons. A hush had descended over the house, heavy and waiting, as though the very walls were holding their breath. In the drawing room, Poirot stood by the fire, perfectly composed in his charcoal morning suit and amethyst cravat. A gleam shone in his eyes, not of triumph, but of certainty. Around him, the remaining residents of the house had gathered. Veronica Vale sat closest to him, her expression drawn, but composed. Lady Isabel stood near the hearth, her features unreadable, arms folded stiffly across her chest. Hargreaves stood silently by the door, as if guarding it. Even Inspector Merrick had returned that morning, called by Poirot with firm urgency. The final chime rang. 8:47. Poirot turned to face them. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice calm but resolute, "you are all aware that this house has been the scene of not one, but 3 deaths. Sir Everard Vale, Dr. Lionel Reeves, and Basil Quayle all passed within a short span. At first glance, each death appeared explainable, but as always, appearances deceive." He clasped his hands. "Now I shall explain what truly happened, from the beginning. 3 deaths, 1 hand. Poirot began with Reeves. He was the first target, a man of ambition and secrets. He discovered the Admiral's confession by accident, perhaps during one of his late-night conversations with Sir Everard. Rather than alert the authorities, he sought to leverage it, to sell the family's shame, perhaps to a journalist or collector of wartime curiosities. Poirot turned to Lady Isabel. You knew, you overheard him, or perhaps you intercepted one of his letters. Either way, you realized what he had found. You invited him to the greenhouse that night, under the pretext of discussing your late husband's estate. There, you poisoned him, a rare compound. It mimicked the symptoms of a heart attack. Lady Isabel said nothing. Her jaw clenched. Poirot went on. Basil Quayle died next. He too grew curious. He noticed the inconsistencies in the story. He questioned the timing of the chimes. He even examined the back of the mantel clock, but he discovered too much. That night, he confronted you, Lady Isabel, in the upstairs corridor, and you pushed him. Lady Isabel finally spoke. "You can't prove that." "Ah, but I can," said Poirot. "In the folds of your gown, the hem was stained with beeswax, the same kind used in the seal. You were sealing a document you intended to destroy, the Admiral's confession. When Quayle caught you, there was a struggle. He fell." Veronica gasped softly. "But," Poirot said, lifting a finger, "this is not the end of the story, because there is one more player in this drama, one who has remained invisible, yet ever present. He reached into his pocket and produced a photograph, the same one found earlier. Everard, Reeves, and Quayle all standing together. "Do you notice what is missing?" Poirot asked, holding the image up. "There should be a fourth man." Veronica leaned forward. "Jonathan," she whispered. "Oui," Poirot said. "Jonathan Vale, long presumed dead, disowned by his father after an alleged theft of family funds. But Jonathan never died. He changed his name. And he returned to Eldercombe, under our very noses." He turned to the door. "Hargreaves, would you care to join us in the circle?" The butler froze, his face paled. Veronica stood. "No, it can't be." Poirot stepped forward. "Hargreaves is Jonathan Vale. He assumed the role of loyal servant to return undetected, to live in the house that had cast him out. But he had no interest in vengeance until Reeves discovered the Admiral's confession and threatened to expose everything." Poirot's voice softened. "You couldn't bear to lose it all again, could you? You had made peace with your exile. But your father's secrets would destroy the family name and your place in it. So you decided to keep the truth buried." The room was silent. Then Hargreaves, no, Jonathan, spoke. "She was the one who killed them," he said, his voice trembling. "Isabel, I only helped cover it up. I didn't want anyone to suffer, but the family would have been ruined." Poirot shook his head slowly. "You helped dispose of the confession. You moved Reeves's body. And when Basil Quayle died, you ensured the corridor was cleared of any trace. You were not just a bystander, you were an accomplice." Lady Isabel finally broke. "We did it for the same reason," she said, her voice brittle. "To preserve Eldercombe. You think I killed out of greed? Number I killed out of duty. Everard wanted to confess everything, to hand over the last of our dignity to the newspapers." She turned to Veronica. "He wanted to destroy us." Veronica's face was unreadable. Poirot stepped between them. "Destruction does not come from truth, madame," he said quietly. "It comes from silence, from secrets twisted into lies. And now the violet hour has struck, and all is revealed. A new morning." Later that morning, as Inspector Merrick led both Hargreaves and Lady Isabel away in quiet dignity, Poirot and Veronica stood beneath the grey sky. The mist had lifted at last, revealing the gardens in pale sunlight. "She loved him, you know," Veronica said softly. "In her way." Poirot nodded. "I believe she did. But love, mademoiselle, cannot justify murder, and certainly not two." They walked slowly. "I suppose I must decide what to do with all this," she murmured, looking back at the old house. "You must," Poirot said, "but you will do so honestly, with both eyes open." She smiled faintly. "I shall rename the hall." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "To what, may I ask? The Hour of Truth?" Poirot smiled. "Très bien. A fitting name, for the past has struck its final chime, and the future now awaits.